I'm not gonna lie, I used to be that guy that tracked everything from HRV to sleep to macros to 1 rep max to running volume. And then I realized I was going through analysis paralysis, doing too much in the analysis and not much on the doing. And I'm hoping through this video, I can provide you some key metrics that you can track to help you achieve your goals and focus. So let's jump right in. So before jumping into any of the metrics, I want to cover some of the key focus areas or goals that I hear from friends or acquaintances around what they're trying to achieve. So I narrowed it down to 3 main topics that I hear a lot from folks. And then at the end, I'll go over what I'm currently working on and the metrics that I use to track my progress. So let's start off with the #1 goal that I hear from folks all the time, especially right now with us coming out of a pandemic and the weather is warming up. It is getting lean for summer. So when it comes to getting lean for summer, there's 4 things that you're going to focus on. #1, it's body composition. So really focusing on the weight and body fat percentage. #2, macros. #3, your programming, so the workouts that you're doing. And then #4, your water intake. So let's double click into each item so we can get a better understanding of what's really required. From a body composition standpoint, I really like to focus on the weight and body fat percentage. And the way that you're gonna find out where you currently stand is by getting a body composition test. So there's a couple of different ways that you can get this done. You can go to your local gym. They typically have a scale that will provide you both your weight and your body fat percentage. You could also buy your own online. For those first 2 options of the local gym or getting your own, I found that they don't provide the most accurate data. And what I actually did this year that was different from before is I got what's called a DEXA scan, so DEXA scan. There's a couple different ways you can do it. The best way that I would recommend is just Google DEXA scan near me, and then it'll show you a bunch of different places where you can get this done. Essentially what's different with a DEXA scan versus the scales that you see at the gym is it'll actually use a camera to scan your body and then also use the scale to identify what your metrics are in a more accurate way versus the scales you'll get at the gym. This typically costs around $75 or so, but that will just depend on the provider. But essentially, you want to get your most accurate data on your weight and body fat percentage. Now, this is going to help you set up where you currently stand, and then from there, you can start to build a plan of where you want to go. There's tons of different graphs that you can see online of like what is a healthy body composition for a male and female, so I don't want to get into that. But another way that you can start to build a plan is by hiring a dietitian. Now, I know this does cost money and there's always question marks around, am I going to get my return on investment, or is it really worth it to hire a dietitian? Me as a certified trainer, I've worked with 2 different dietitians in the past just based on the different goals I had at that time, and it was the best money I ever spent. You get a ton of education around understanding how macros and nutrition work in your body for specific fuel sources. And then the other side to everything too is looking at hiring a trainer. So this now jumps into the programming piece. The trainer's really gonna help you build a program and have workouts that fit not only your schedule, but the macros that the dietitian built out for you. So we've got our body composition tests, we've got our macros, and we've got our training. The 4th piece is gonna be around water intake. So water intake requirements are gonna vary depending on person, size, height, weight, all that good stuff. You can Google online water calculators to get an understanding of what your requirements are. For me, training twice a day, conditioning in the morning and training in the afternoon, I like to drink roughly 1 gallon of water when I have those 2 session days, and that does not include my protein shakes or my coffee that I drink. Now, when it comes to tracking your progress from a body composition standpoint, I always like to put at least 3 months at a minimum before taking that body composition test again. The reason why is because I want to think long term when it comes to my programming and my macros, and losing true body fat does take time, and building muscle takes time. I know it's super easy to go through the crash diets that you may see online of lose X amount of pounds in 30 days. Most of those programs are crap, and you're gonna end up gaining the weight back. It is a harsh reality of the fitness industry, but I'm not gonna lie to you and say that it's easy to get where you wanna be. It does take time, so allow yourself that time. So for me, I like to put my DEXA scans 6 months in between each other, typically at the beginning of the year and then the middle of the year. So again, just to recap for Lean for Summer, you wanna get that first body composition test just to know where you currently stand. Macros, which you can work with a dietitian, or you can use MyFitnessPal, which is a great app to help you log your food. #3 is gonna be around hiring a trainer and ensuring you have the right programming to support your goals. And #4 is around water intake, and that will all depend on the person. Jumping into #2, which is training for Hyrox. This is one that I keep hearing more and more about as it becomes more popular in the US. I've done 2 so far this year, and I can honestly say that they are a blast. So essentially it's running mixed with functional fitness fitness tests, so you can think of like sleds, rowers, ski ergs, walking lunges, wall balls, all that cool stuff that you see online combined into one event. With half of the competition being running, I think tracking your running volume is going to be extremely important. You want to be able to run fast, stop, perform an event, then pick up back running and run fast again. So it's that ability to stop and go, but pick your speed up right off the bat. That's going to be huge. So for me, whenever I get ready for a Hyrox competition, I want to make sure that I'm in good running condition. I do that by tracking with my Garmin watch. I also like to use the app Strava, so I'm able to compare some of the miles that I do with my friends that I train with. The second piece is going to be around metabolic conditioning. So this is really understanding where do you currently stand from a performance standpoint when it comes to the rower, when it comes to the skier. These are two events that do require endurance, but different from running. So for me, when I'm training for a competition, I like to track my splits of 500 meters because it is one of the data points that you see on the screen when working on the rower or skier. So seeing where you currently stand, whether it's a minute and a half, 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes for 500 meters, and then breaking up your workout to say, okay, I'm gonna do 5 rounds of 100 meters as hard as I can. Thinking of it like a sprint workout with running. If you have a 1 mile run that you wanna get really good at, one of the best ways to get better at that is to divide it up into quarters. So that would be a quarter mile and then do those super fast. Over time, you will be able to run that mile faster. So I take that same methodology and apply it to the ski ergs and rowers. So tracking that performance on your 500 meter splits, I think is a key metric that you want to track for Hyrox competitions. The third piece is going to be around sled workouts. Now, this is very specific, but I also think it's very important when it comes to Hyrox. The number one reason why I say that is because the terrain that you push the sled on during the competition is going to be far different than what you are experiencing in the gym. What do I mean by that? Most gyms that have sleds typically have them on a turf, so you're able to just slide across with whatever weight you have. When it comes to Hyrox, and if you haven't experienced this yet, it feels like a sandy carpet that you're trying to push on. So if you trained with 300 pounds in the gym, it'll feel like 400 pounds in the gym. So what do I do to prepare for that? It isn't a variable that I can control and I can't change the competition, but one of the things that I can change is the programming that I do. So when it comes to my sled pushes and my sled pulls, when I work out, I like to add more weight, anywhere between 25 to 100 pounds more, just depending on how many reps or volume that I'm doing for that specific workout. This will help your body get adapted to heavier weight, therefore translating to the additional strain that you'll receive from the crappy ground that you'll be performing during Hyrox. And the fourth piece is going to be around heart rate. Well, we have a visitor today. This is Odessa, who seems to want to scratch this right now during the video. If you know me for a while, you know that I am obsessed with tracking heart rate. The main reason why is I don't ever want to feel like I'm going too hard too often. As an ultra endurance athlete, I need to do a ton of volume when it comes to running, and I want to make sure that I'm not putting too much strain on my heart. Heart is the battery to life, so you want to make sure that you're stressing it a good amount, but also giving it time to recover. By mixing functional fitness events with running, you are putting additional strain on the body. So it's important to get accurate data from your devices such as your watch or your phone. I like to wear a Garmin chest strap whenever I work out just to ensure that I'm not going too hard too often. The other piece to this is that when it comes to the heart rate monitors that you'll see on wrists, whether it's a watch or a sleeping device, that data is not going to be as accurate as something right next to your heart. I've gone through various tests where I've worn both and just kind of monitoring where my heart rate was, and the wrist heart rate monitors just do not give you any kind of accurate data compared to what a chest strap will do. So for me, I always want to make sure that I'm wearing a chest strap whenever it comes to anything endurance-based, whether it's metabolic conditioning or running. So just to recap for Hyrox, the 4 things that you want to track: number 1, running volume, metabolic conditioning, sled workouts, and your heart rate. Okay, so jumping right into number 3, which is run a marathon. I feel like it's one of those bucket list items that a lot of people do want to do. Some go through with it, some love it, some hate it. For me, I'll be honest, when I ran my marathon in 2015, I absolutely hated it. I didn't know anything about endurance sports. I was more of just like a weekend warrior or 45-minute workout during lunch, but that was about it. But if I could go back and redo it again, I would focus on 3 things. Number 1, running volume. Number 2, heart rate. And number 3, fueling, and we'll talk about that in a second here. But let's start off with running volume. So very similar to Hyrox, I want to be tracking my running volume, and I do that by using my Garmin watch, and all of my data is inputted into my Strava app. The second piece is going to be around heart rate, which we talked about in the Hyrox section, using a chest strap heart rate monitor that will sync to my watch, so then I know what kind of zones I'm working within. But the third item is where I want to spend the most time, and that is fueling. This is super individualized person by person. The way our body handles certain fuels before, during, and after endurance events, such as a half marathon, full marathon, you're on your feet for multiple hours at a time. Now, walking into that type of event with fuel in your system is super crucial. You wouldn't go to a drag racing competition without gas in the car. It wouldn't perform as well. But it also is the type of gas that you put in the car that's going to impact its performance. Similar to humans, we like to have certain fuels in our body to ensure that we're performing at a certain level. So what may work for me may not work for you. And so what I tell people all the time that want to get into endurance sports such as running a marathon is testing out certain fuels, whether it be bananas, oatmeal, smoothies. Again, this is all going to vary from person to person. So give yourself that opportunity to test things out throughout your training versus doing this the day of the race. That's probably one of the biggest mistakes that I've seen people make when getting ready for a marathon is they'll test something new the day of a race. So that's during is also crucial because especially for a marathon, you can be running anywhere between 3 to 6 to 7 hours. You're gonna need some fuel during that run to ensure that you can continue. So it's easy to see a lot of the goos and different things that people eat. Again, similar to what you eat before, it's good to test these out. So I know in marathon training, typically you have one long run throughout the week. Use those weeks before the marathon and those long runs as your testing grounds to say, all right, I'm gonna try this goo or I'm gonna try this food during my training session and see how I feel. Was it good? Was it bad? And then the final piece is about post-training fueling to ensure that you're not crashing or not fueling the muscles that are in need for some nutrients. For me, I like a very high carb and protein meal shortly after. Typically a white meat, not so much like a dark meat just because it doesn't take as much work to digest. But again, that's me. All right, so now I'll jump into what I'm currently working on, which is podium for a Spartan race. So for me, that is my big goal for 2022. So the things that I'm tracking are running volume, heart rate, my sleep, and protein intake sources. So let's jump into the first one. Very similar to Hyrox and running a marathon, I'm tracking my running volume to ensure that I'm getting enough volume under my feet in preparation for my races. So the distance that I focus on are ultra marathons, so 50K or 31 miles, however you want to look at it. I need to make sure that I'm getting a certain amount of volume under my feet in preparation for these races. The second piece is going to be around heart rate. So for ultra endurance races, my weeks can vary between 40 to 75 miles on a weekly basis. I want to make sure that I'm not going too hard too often. I like to follow the 80-20 rule of if I'm running 50 miles one week, 80% of those miles are done at a lower intensity and the other 20% are done at a higher intensity. This will ensure, again, that I'm not going too hard too often, but also allowing my body to adapt to all of the additional volume that I'm putting on my body. Now, the third piece is around sleep. I used to use Whoop. I don't use it anymore. I'll have a separate video around why I stopped using it, but essentially what I do now from a sleep perspective is I follow a very regimented PM and AM routine. I like to have my last meal eaten 2 hours before wanting to fall asleep. I turn off electronics 1 hour before wanting to fall asleep, and I always like to use a Theragun or anything like that to take out any kinks that I may be feeling from the day before. I always make sure that I get 7 hours of solid sleep. So for me, I like to be in bed 30 minutes before wanting to fall asleep, and I like to have a cool apartment to make sure that when I fall asleep, I stay asleep. Now, when I wake up, I typically don't look at any devices for the first hour upon waking up. I want to give myself that natural time to wake up and really get awake for the day. And I'll use that time to drink my water, take in some coffee, but also do some journaling to start the day off. And then the fourth piece around fish and eggs. So me, I already know what my macro requirements are. So kind of related back to what we were talking about being lean for summer. I know what my macro requirements are from a running and lifting standpoint. And now I'm at a point where I know what types of exact foods I need when it comes to those high volume weeks. For me, it's always been best that I eat fish or eggs as my main source of protein versus a fatty chicken or a ribeye steak. Don't get me wrong, I absolutely love red meat. So for right now, as I'm still in season as an age group athlete, I do typically minimize the amount of red meat that I eat on a weekly basis. It's typically one meal a week that I'll have. So we covered a couple different scenarios and different metrics that you can follow. So what really matters? That's the big question that everybody's trying to understand. Me as an endurance athlete, there are 3 things that I follow no matter what. My running volume, my heart rate, and how I feel. How do I do this? Number one, I track all of my runs through my watch and Strava. Number two, my heart rate is accurately tracked through my chest strap. And number three, I didn't talk too much about this in the examples before, but I do have a fitness journal where I write down my workouts and things that I ate. This is a really good way to track how you feel after a certain workout, kind of talking about what we were saying in the marathon piece. If you ate a certain fuel and it made you feel really good, maybe that's something to jot down. You could also start to write down any types of aches that you may have on your body as it relates to training. If something starts to be chronic versus just a single day issue, you can then go back to your journal to say, hey, maybe that's what caused it. What are the things that we can do to fix it? If you're looking for some more in-depth information around this, I did write an article and put a link to it in the description below. If you have any questions or concerns, please let me know in the comments section below. I do appreciate you watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.